Baby, I just finished Shanika Grant's book, Real Life Never Felt So Real, and I finished it in under an hour. Now, is that because the book was just that captivating? Or is it because it was just that bad that I had to just close my laptop? Want to talk about it? Let's get into it. Now, in my previous video, I mentioned that Nika had a book out that was on Amazon, and I briefly talked about how, she talked about her whole entire life story in the book. And by the reviews, it looked like people really wasn't feeling the book. I mean, at the time, it only had like 1 star. So I decided to go against my better judgment and just get the book and read it for myself. So I purchased the book for $11.99, the Kindle version, which you don't have to have a Kindle in order to read it, because I don't have one. And it was an instant download. Plus, I do not want Nika to be having my physical address because I be dragging her all over Beyonce's internet. And Nika elevator don't go up that high. Immediately open the book, you see the author's photo, which is Nika. And the photo immediately gave Facebook selfie. And you know how Nika takes her Facebook photos looking crazy. It didn't give like a professional photo. And normally an author's photo represents like who they are at the time they wrote the book. Because obviously this book is talking about the trauma and heartache she experienced in her life. So your author's photo should be something that's present. It should show you looking good because it should represent triumph. You overcame obstacles, you defeated the odds, and it gave absolutely none of that. She didn't even take the time to either A, get a professional photographer, because I'm pretty sure her bookies would have helped fund that if they knew she was trying to do something really good. And 2, she didn't even take it on a quality camera phone. For a memoir as tragic as this, the photo should have represented I have survived, but it gave nothing but I look a mess. So we get into the first chapter, which I have to say none of the book has any chapters. It's just talking. And we go into Nika talking about her childhood and how her mom didn't like her because she looked different than her other siblings who we get introduced to. Nika has a brother and then a sister, but in the book it doesn't detail who's the oldest or who's the youngest. And she details like the crazy things that go on within her childhood that she's spoken about on social media. Nika describes her mother as being like irrational, just mentally all over the place. She talks about how her mom left her in the trailer and set it on fire and took her other siblings out. And when I read that part, immediately I was like, wow. She had talked about that very often. Let me go on Google to look at an article because I know something like that would have made the news. I know something like that. There would have been some article about it. I went and I researched, and the earliest thing I could find was back in 2003, and I know that had nothing to do with her. So there was no article that detailed any of that. But as I kept reading, I realized that there probably wasn't an article because in the book, and you'll hear me talk about it, and if you've read the book, you understand, no one there like utilizes resources. So many criminal things happen in this book. No one called the police, no one calls the fire department, no one calls the ambulance, no one calls anybody for help. They call amongst each other, and everyone is so incompetent besides like 2 people. So it's really like, unfortunately, Nika was really doomed from the start. Already, the book fails to give each character some type of development so that we know who these characters are and can develop some type of, relationship with these characters just by reading about them. I would love to know how Nika's mother grew up. I would love to know what caused her to be this way. Also would like to know more about like where Nika's siblings are today in 2024. So fast forward, because the book has a lot of fast forwards. You just be moving all over the place. You don't know if you're in the beginning, middle, or end. After Nika mom does the unthinkable, the grandma that Nika always talks about takes temporary guardianship of all of the children, and they stay with the grandma for maybe like a few days to maybe a few weeks. And then Nika's mom is allowed to grab the kids and bring them back, which is really telling, because if you are a mother and your daughter, your adult daughter, does the unthinkable, literally tries to kill one of her children, why did you A, not call the police, 2, slap some sense into her head, or 3, keep the children and try to, you know, gain custody of them? But no, Nika grandma doesn't do that. Nika grandma gives the kids back to the mother, and then it doesn't get better from there. As I continue to read this book, I can't help but to think that Nika's mother has a lot of mental health issues. I believe Nika's mother may have been bipolar, a severe case of being bipolar, definitely narcissistic. I believe that she had maybe PTSD from something, some type of trauma. But we very, like a small bit, get introduced to Nika's dad, but it was like really quick. He came to the hospital, he saw Nika and was like, "That's not my baby," and he left, and the rest is history. So Nika and her siblings are back in the care of the mother, and they shouldn't have been. So Nika talks about how her mother now has a boyfriend, and this is the stepdad. And one day, Nika and her siblings were inside the trailer, and the mom tells them, go outside and get some ice cream or something like that. And Nika's mom decides to take a lighter and or match or whatever, but she sets the mattress on fire. And Nika talks about how she's just standing outside, looking in the window, watching her mom just basically stare at the mattress. And then I guess when the fire gets too much, the mom starts screaming for help. There's a lot of gaps after that, because Nika talks about, well, I called my grandma for help. And that's an issue, because it's like, why are you calling your grandma for help? Y'all live in the middle of nowhere in South Carolina, and you call your grandma for help, which she did talk about in the book. Grandma comes an hour later. But what about calling 911? When I was a kid, I was taught that in an emergency, you call 911, you call the police. And even like when my family used to have these fights and it would scare me as a kid, I remember running on the porch of my grandma's house and grabbing the house phone and calling 911 before I could even like truly understand what I was doing. And my family knew better than to be like, blah, 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 because they just knew how crazy they were. But I was always taught to call 911. I knew how to call the fire department. These are things I learned in school. And that brings me to this next subject. Throughout this book, there is a lot of grammatical errors. In fact, there are some things spelled wrong. I think even one part she spelled her own name wrong. My brain almost got into a car accident reading all of these run-on sentences. There were no stop signs anywhere. But it really goes to show the lack of education, which, like I said, brings me to this point. After that happens, Nika grandma takes custody of the children, this time for good. And they go and live with their grandma. And Nika talks about how, you know, the transition was a lot. Nika was starting to see family members that she never saw before, because the mom literally kept them enclosed in the trailer all the time. It sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Nika also talks about when she was with her grandma enrolled them in school. That was their first time going to school. Mind you, we're still in childhood, so this could be like maybe kindergarten to elementary school, but that was Nika's and her siblings' first time actually being in school. That also sounds familiar. So far in the book, it's like history literally repeating itself. And as I continue to read this book, I can't help but to think, if you took the same book and handed it to Nika's daughter Naya, you handed this book to Papa, you handed it to all her children, even the small ones, all these children could relate to the same story. Only thing is, you're changing the characters. Not saying the characters don't exist, but you're just literally changing the names. For Naya, instead of Naya, it would be, Shanika would be Naya's, like in the story, so it don't confuse you, how Nika's mom was this messed up woman. In Naya's story, the messed up woman, it's Nika. Nika's the messed up mother. In all her children, even the smaller ones that haven't really even experienced anything, once they start to really fully understand, that's their story too. And that should be really embarrassing that you wrote this memoir about all these tragic things that happened, but you are repeating the cycle for your children, and they too will have their tragic memoir. Nika's mother, throughout the story pops in maybe twice, but it wasn't to take the children back to the home. At this time, remember I mentioned Nika's mom is with a man that's abusive. So mom has run off with her man and put her man before her kids. Sounds familiar. And basically mama has ran off in the sunset and we don't hear about her again. So one part of the book that was very disturbing to read was the violation of Nika's brother. I couldn't help but to think, did Nika have permission to even tell his story? Because it's not like this is a child today where you want to help advocate for that child. So if you know a child's being violated and you're an adult, you go out there and you tell it all. You tell it to the right people to get that child some help. But Nika's brother, I'm sure, is an adult. And I feel like she shouldn't have told his story, especially if she did not have permission, because that's something that is traumatic and for some people very embarrassing. A lot of victims are embarrassed about what happens to them because they blame themselves. So I really hope that she got his full permission to tell his story, but knowing her, she probably didn't, because I'm sure she didn't get Hayward's permission to not only write about him in this book, but to write another book about him. In fact, a book strictly just about him. The violation of Nika's brother goes on for like 2 years, and time also passes because I believe now when they got to grandma's house, the brother was like 13 at the time. And like I said, the book doesn't give much context because it has like so many gaps. There's no chronological order really, because you don't know, like, okay, well, did you move to grandma's house when you were in elementary school? Did you move to grandma's house when you were a teenager? Like, how long were y'all not in school? Did your mom try to homeschool you? It was absolutely none of that. And when Nika goes and tells her grandma about what's been happening to the brother, the grandma doesn't believe, oh, that's not true. They, wouldn't do these things, because the brother is being violated by one of the uncles that lives there. There's 2 uncles, one that is a Chester and one that is just batshit crazy. And the grandma doesn't believe it. In the book, you start to see a little bit of character development, enough to comprehend the most basic level of the book, but not enough to like really feel the book. This book would be so good if it was like a urban fictional book, like The Coldest Winter Ever, like something like that. This book would be perfect for that. But for something as supposed to be like a memoir, hell no. So like I said, grandma doesn't believe it at all, and basically brushes it off, and the uncle now gains the confidence to basically get sloppy with it. And this is the thing that, you know, I want to talk about when it comes to the Black community, because I can only speak on the community I'm a part of. In Black households, the family will exile the gay nephew or the gay daughter, kick them out of the family, never speak to them again, try to pray the gay away. But they always are very hush-mouthed about that uncle in the family or that granddad in the family that they know have violated the children in the family, because they have been violated by their brother or their grandfather, and they keep that person in the family. He still lives at grandma's house with no job, no nothing going on, and they don't say anything to him. The most your mom may say is that y'all can't spend the night, or, you know, we just gonna watch them, or sometimes they don't even care, but they're very afraid of that one uncle, that one daughter that's gay, because you're not gonna make my child gay. But you still have this Chester molester here to stare at here at all of the Thanksgiving, Christmas, all the family functions, the cookouts. Everybody know this person is disgusting, but no one says anything. And that's very unfortunate, and it's very sad that Nika and her family, the children and family, has to endure that. But then you also have to think about, well, Nika, there's been allegations like this in your household and you have not done nothing. In fact, you have really denied it. There's been evidence and proof reported by your own children, and you denied it and bullied your children and called them liars. Moving on, we talk, you know, more about, well, Nika talks more about how things go on in her grandmother's house. Her grandmother is strict. She don't play, but the grandma also is like one of those grandmas that she babies the men in the family, and she's hard on the girls. And it really tells. Now we get introduced, excuse me, to some family members that are just pretty much decent, tolerable. Nika's grandma has a big plot of land, and one of the daughters, which is Nika's aunt, lives on there, but very briefly, because I believe she was like visiting from New York, and she went back and she didn't come back. And then you have other family members that are just living in different trailers on the land. You also have, we get introduced to Nika's cousin, but she calls him Uncle Dirk. And she talks about how Uncle Dirk lives in DC and he has this great job, and he, you know, visits Nika often. That was like her first time meeting Uncle Dirk and meeting a lot of her family members, which I'm pretty sure her kids today don't know a lot of their cousins or great grandma or nothing, but I digress. But she talks about how Uncle Dirk really instills the importance of, you know, being a dark-skinned girl and loving herself. And Dirk gave her books to read for not only just her and her siblings, and teaching them their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. And she talks really highly of Dirk and how, you know, Dirk, when he had to go back to DC, Nika would cry because she just knew like she would be back under the tyrant ruling of her grandma. Dirk would actually take them to go places and spend time with them and really talk about them and how are they feeling, what's really going on, and really be there for them. And that was probably the only refreshing part of the book. The way that Nika's mother smothers and entraps her and her siblings, not because she loved them, but because she was probably lazy and hiding something. Nika's grandma then does the exact same thing to Nika and her siblings, not allowing them to go outside and play, have really friends, and just, it was nothing but come home, clean, do your homework, go to church, go to bed all the time. Nika does that with her children now. I don't think Nika's children really has any friends besides who they see in school, and they're getting bullied for that. I don't think that Nika's children also explores other than the dirt roads of the trailers and stuff that they live in. And that's really sad. And I feel as though her children will do the same thing if the cycle isn't broken. And Nika's already working on Naya as we speak. The book really doesn't give any type of plot buildup. It just so fast moves. I didn't even know that we went from being a teenager to now we're an adult. But eventually Nika's brother that was being violated tried to kill himself, then killed the uncle, but then decided he's just gonna run away, and he does. And in the book later we see that he runs and is staying in rooming houses and basically hitchhiking his way through. It's no stability. And Nika's sister ends up getting pregnant and decides, I can't do this no more, and she leaves and lives with her child's father, who I believe eventually they get married or whatever, but the sister then moves away. So now it's just Nika left. Nika decides that she is going to run away and be with her brother. So they basically are hitchhiking, staying in rooming houses across like the East Coast, not East Coast, the West Coast, because they were in like Phoenix. And then Nika decides like, this is not the life for me. She goes running back to grandma's house, and Nika then enrolls herself into Job Corps. So that was very, very fast. And in Job Corps, like, how should I put it? This is where I think Nika was probably like, I'm tired, and she wanted to just stop because the book gave very rushed. So Nika's in Job Corps. She doesn't even tell us, you know, what. She doesn't even tell us how long she's in Job Corps. All I know is, boom, she is pregnant with her first child, which is Naya. We don't get a backstory on the relationship between Nika and Naya's dad. Were they in a relationship? Were they sweethearts? Were they childhood friends? Like, what were they? We don't even get a name. But we got everything about Hayward, baby. But we didn't get a name about this guy. So Nika's in Job Corps. She's pregnant. Then all of a sudden, she has to go on leave. So she goes, tells her grandma she's coming back. Grandma's like, okay, cool. But then when Nika gets back to South Carolina, grandma says, hell no, you can't stay with me. I don't know the switch up. So Nika talks about now she's struggling, and then she goes and asks to stay with her aunt. So Nika now talks, all of a sudden now she's pregnant with baby number 2, which we don't even know, like, hey, how did you meet your oldest son, Papa? How did you meet his dad? What's the dad's name? What was the relationship between you and the dad? When did you even get pregnant? Because we saw you in Job Corps, then you got pregnant with Naya, you came back to South Carolina, and now it seems like when you knocked on the door to grandma's house, you're pregnant again, walking 5 feet to the next trailer. Like, it's just so confusing. So that's that. Nika talks about the struggle she's dealing with being a single mom, and now I'm about to rush through this video because it's just, at this point, it was just all over the place. I don't know how many kids Nika has around this time, but now we get into her meeting Hayward, and oh, she definitely does the character build-up of this one child. Hayward. In the beginning of the book, which was never even mentioned, I mentioned how I dealt with hurt so long, and I met Hayward, and Hayward was a liar. He was a cheater. He was always in the streets. He was a drug dealer, but he had to do what he had to do to support his family, because instead of getting a real job to support your family, you go and become a small-time drug dealer. But let Nika tell it. She is talking about Hayward like he was Big Meech. He was out here being the real big-time kingpin, which he was not. And she even started talking about herself like she was some queen pin. But she talks about Hayward, how they ended up basically living together. Nika now has, I don't know how many kids, but she's on Section 8. But because Hayward is selling drugs and the police is knocking on Nika's door every 5 business days, Nika gets put off of Section 8. And she talks about how Hayward is basically going to jail, and I think Hayward is in jail for a very long time, but he gets back up and gets back out. He's back living with Nika, and now Nika is again off Section 8 because she got kicked out. She lost her voucher, and now she's basically trying to get herself together. But she now talks about how now we're pregnant with baby number 4 and blah blah blah. So I think I don't even know how much kids Nika has at this point, but when Nika talks about baby number 4, I don't know if it's now they got 4 kids total, but really, let's say it is baby number 4 and now she got 6 kids. She should have stopped right there. She should have stopped, but no, she didn't. And now in the book we see, I said the book moves fast. She talks about 10 years in this relationship and now he just leaves me, blah blah blah. Girl, so let's say whatever kids you had at that moment, you should have stopped. Because at what point did you think continuously having kids by this man was going to be beneficial? So now you were struggling. This man just up and left you, and you just continuously have kids. And then after that, the book ends. It doesn't give any type of like, oh, I decided to go to school, I got my master's degree, I was able to take care of my kids, and it does nothing. It just ends right there. And I don't blame Nika, because when you look at her life, I mean, what good has come? This book is nothing but, I don't even consider it like a really good memoir, because it has like a grammatical errors, no character development. You can't even get a connection with the story because characters pop up out of nowhere, then they disappear. We don't know what's going on with these people even after the fact. The book is very much all over the place. She spelled her name wrong in some parts, but she really gave some development when it comes to Hayward as a person, all these negative qualities. But it was something about Hayward, girl. You stayed there, you lay it low and spread it wide for him, all these kids. So he couldn't have been that much of a bad person. But at the end of this book, I don't feel like my money was wasted. I hope that the, $5 that Amazon gives her as a profit, she uses it for something and not to be shitting it up at bingo. But I will say that only thing I wish I could get back was my time. So I read this book so you don't have to. It's not worth purchasing. I honestly believe the reviews. Now if you want a book that's gonna give you a good laugh, then go to one of those Reddit pages that be talking about her, and someone will maybe post a page or ask somebody bought the book. But don't waste your money, because if you don't waste your money, you waste your time. But that's all I got. I ain't got no more, and that's it. Bye.